Hello, my friends. In this video, we'll be covering the first sample of the 12 samples that I have prepared for you of Eastern hunter-gatherers from Sidelkino in Samarskaya Oblast in central Russia. Now, these Eastern hunter-gatherers inhabited central Russia in the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods. This sample is actually the most recent. She lived in this village in the Neolithic period, and let's begin with her ancestry and her genetic results. First of all, her mitochondrial lineage was U5A2. She does not have a Y DNA, but her mitochondrial lineage is actually U5A2. Very typical mitochondrial lineage for various hunter-gatherers of Europe. And with G25, this is essentially what she scores. She's scoring a mixture of Fontova 3, ancient North Eurasian, Western hunter-gatherer, and Pinarbasi hunter-gatherer from Anatolia. So a mixture of basically ancient North Eurasian, Western hunter-gatherer, and Anatolian hunter-gatherer. Is there anything that's surprising in this result with G25? Yes, a little bit. A little bit surprising that she's scoring this much Anatolian hunter-gatherer. I was not expecting this much from this sample. I was also not expecting, maybe this is because of the Caucasus or whatever admixture, maybe a little bit of Southern or Caucasus admixture. I was also not expecting this much Western admixture in this sample. 40% WHG is a little bit too much. I was expecting maybe 30 or 25%, not 40. But then again, Samara hunter-gatherer also had quite a lot of Western hunter-gatherer admixture. So, and also this is a Neolithic period sample, so whatever Western admixture might have happened, but by this point already. So also leave your thoughts in the comments why you think this individual might have had 40% Western hunter-gatherer admixture. I'll be very curious to read what you think. Your explanations for why this individual has this much Western admixture in her results, in her genome. Moving on to what she scores with my trait predictor, we're going to move on to Noshakot calculator results. So for phenotype, it looks like she's got a brown eye color. Hazel eyes are the second most likely eye color for her, and dark brown eyes are the third most likely eye color for her. She definitely does not have blue eyes or blue eyes with a neighbor center or green eyes. That's completely out of the picture for her. She definitely does not have black, any sort of blonde or red hair, or even light brown hair. She actually has definitely very black hair color. Even dark brown hair is quite improbable for her at only 6% likelihood. So she definitely has black hair at 93% likelihood, and she has light brown skin at 96% likelihood. So she doesn't even have white or olive skin tone. She has very robust prediction for light brown skin, black hair, and brown eyes. So she's quite dark, quite non-European in terms of appearance. There's you're not gonna find people who look like this in Europe. Pretty much, very few people in Europe look as dark as this individual. For hair texture, it looks like she's got wavy or curly hair, although straight hair is also quite possible. Kinky hair is pretty much completely out of the picture. And for nose shape, it looks like she's got split between Greek and snub nose shape. So she's intermediate between Greek and snub nose shapes. For coloring-related variants found in the file, it looks like she's got no blue eye haplotype 3. She's got heterozygous for this variation of BEH2, and she does not have BEH1. Okay. Okay, and she... Wait, I don't want to skip over some of the important stuff. She does not have any light color variants here in SLC45A2. By the way, this is really unusual for Europeans nowadays. It's typical for various hunter-gatherers in Europe to not have any light color variants here, but for modern Europeans, this is very, very, very unusual. Europeans in the modern period pretty much all have two light color variants here in these two variations. But for hunter-gatherers in Europe, this is a very typical genotype. Right, there was a major transformation that happened sometime in the Bronze Age in Europe, where we just sort of switched from 0 to 2 in these variations in SLC45A2 and SLC24A5, and we just kind of went from being really, really brown and really, really dark and really like exotic looking to white and European looking all of a sudden. She doesn't have any light color variants in MC1R. Okay. No predisposition to ginger. And let's go ahead and look at what she scores for the phenotype oracle. So as you can see, the closest phenotypes to her are all brown and really dark and really exotic looking, not really European, not really not really white people whatsoever. Makes sense. Yep, of course. Well, she's got brown eyes and black hair and brown skin, so yeah, makes sense that the closest phenotypes to her are all brown. And the closest mixture is a mixture of Basque plus Indian, and the second closest mixture is a mixture of this plus Indian. The third closest mixture is a mixture of this plus this, and then this plus actually Australoid. So there looks like there is a little bit of an Indian or an Australoid component in her appearance, which is definitely very interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and look at her biomarkers results and see what she scores for that. And it looks like she's got a below average level of vitamin D. Let's look that up in her file. Actually, let's see what she scores for the vitamin D, because that's really extreme. Her score. Yep, makes sense. So she's got this genotype for lower levels of vitamin D, this genotype for lower levels of vitamin D, and this genotype for lower levels. She's got all these genotypes for lower levels of vitamin D, and because of that, her score is really extreme. I mean, look at that. Her score is like right there, almost as extreme as it can be. For cholesterol, she's got above average level of LDL cholesterol, but it's kind of okay. It's not that bad. And above average level of HDL cholesterol, which is also okay. It's also not that bad. And above average level of glucose. Actually, HDL you want to have higher. So her score for HDL is good, actually. For glucose, her score for glucose is a little bit above average, which is okay. For hemoglobin, a little bit above average, which is okay. For blood pressure, typical, which is okay. Iron in the blood, typical. For sex hormone binding globulin, typical. For red blood cell count, typical. For telomere length, a little bit below average. So she's got predisposition to slightly below average telomere length, slightly below average lifespan. And for expected height, she's got slightly below average expected height. So it looks like she's got predisposition to being a little bit shorter, which is definitely very interesting. So she's got predisposition to being shorter in height. Okay, cool. I was expecting Eastern hunter gatherers to be a little bit taller, actually, but looks like for her, in her case, she's got a predisposition to being shorter. Very cool. All right. Let's go ahead and see what she scores for the polygenic risk scores. So it looks like she's got a predisposition to having below average odds of kidney stones issues. All right. Above average odds of hemoglobin E disease, so she's definitely got predisposition to hemoglobin E disease. Actually, let's look that up in the file. Yep, so she's got strong predisposition to hemoglobin E disease. That's actually in the rare diseases and traits panel. Let's go through the rare diseases and traits panel right now. So she's got 10 times higher risk of exfoliation glaucoma. We're gonna see that actually in the polygenic risk score page right here. Yep, we see that right here. 2.3 times increased risk of exfoliation glaucoma. So we see that right here. She's a carrier of risk alleles for neural tube defects and spina bifida, and she does not have any other risk variants for rare disease and trace panel. All right. So going through the polygenic risk score page, she doesn't have any risk variants for migraine. No, I mean, that's a wrong way to phrase it. She doesn't. She has below average odds for migraine. She has average odds for lupus. She has below average odds for gout. Average odds for thyroid cancer. Below average odds for eczema. She has below average odds for polycystic ovary syndrome. Average odds for cataracts. Very high odds for AMD. She has below average odds for average odds for rheumatoid arthritis. She has average odds for Tourette's. She has average odds for epilepsy. She has average odds for asthma. She has average odds for leukemia. She has average odds for vitiligo. She has average odds for myopia. Average for corneal astigmatism. Above average for primary biliary cirrhosis. Very interesting. She has slightly below average for stroke. She has above average odds for male pattern hair loss. Very interesting. So slight predisposition to male pattern hair loss. Good thing she doesn't have to worry about it too much because she's not a male. Below average odds for atrial fibrillation. No risk variants found for deep vein thrombosis, but there is no SNPs, so okay, pretty typical. And definitely below average risk for unipolar depression, which is really good. Average odds for bipolar type 1. Average for schizophrenia. Very high odds for type 2 diabetes and very high odds for type 1 diabetes. Very cool. So her predispositions are really type 1 and type 2 diabetes, which is really interesting. Average for Alzheimer's and below average for multiple sclerosis. So no risk variance for multiple sclerosis and the HLA gene. That's what I'm getting from this, because you cannot get a low score like this if you have any risk variance for MS and the HLA gene. No risk variance for breast cancer out of 6, 2 risk variance out of 6, which is pretty typical. She's got 6 risk variance for testicular cancer out of 16, and she's got all the important risk variance in keto G, so she's quite cooked. But to be honest, these risk variance in keto G, like, they're really common for Europeans, and also she is a female, so this testicular cancer risk variance don't really matter too much for her because she's a female. So testicular cancer doesn't really affect her too much. Celiac disease, no risk variance for that. All right. GSS, no risk variance for that. For Crohn's, no risk variance that are important. Good for that. Riefenstein's, no risk variance. Parkinson's, no risk variance. Gilbert syndrome, no risk variance. Basal cell carcinoma, no risk variance. Peter-Jeghers, no risk variance. Hypoplasia. Jacob Creutzfeldt, Waardenburg, no risk variance. FHC, irritable bowel syndrome. Congenital sensitivity to pain, Brugada. I'm not seeing any risk variance for that, actually. For allergies, let's see how many risk variance she's got. She's got 4 out of 16, which is really good. That's actually below the 1/3 threshold, so that's actually really good. She's quite healthy. I'm not seeing anything that's unusual or atypical here. All right. So we remember that the risk variance are the risk conditions are AMD, various type 1 diabetes, especially. Type 1 diabetes is definitely a risk for her, and hemoglobin E disease. And okay, let's go through the monogenic results and see what she scores for that. Okay, so it looks like for Warrior versus Warrior, so essentially taking into account the COMT, MAOA, and MAOB genotypes, she has a predisposition to intermediate phenotype, intermediate amount of MAOA and COMT enzymes, intermediate speed of dopamine reuptake, intermediate amount of dopamine in the system, intermediate ability to tolerate stress. Definitely a very European European phenotype to have. Okay. For DRD2, she has a predisposition to higher number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain. That's actually not a very European genotype to have. This has certain connotations, such as higher odds of schizophrenia and bipolar. It doesn't really have a direct link to scoring higher for schizophrenia and bipolar for the polygenic risk score page on this app, but it does have some links to higher odds of schizophrenia and bipolar in real life. For levels of 5-HT and serotonin, it looks like she has a predisposition to higher levels of 5-HT and serotonin. So slight protection from such conditions as anxiety and depression, which is really good. Also a very European genotype to have, really good. European phenotype to have, really good to see. For autism and mental health results, for autism section of the mental health results, looks like she has a higher odds of autism. Definitely very interesting. I'm not sure the ethnic implications of that. I feel like autism is a condition that affects every ethnicity roughly equally. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Actually, it might not be. It might be more widespread in certain ethnicities. I'm not sure, but I was under the impression that it affects every ethnicity roughly equally. But it looks like she has a higher odds of autism. And for lactose persistence, she has intermediate or higher odds of lactose intolerance. She doesn't really have any of the variants for lactose persistence. Definitely very interesting. For OXTR and the empathy gene, it looks like she's got average level of empathy, so she doesn't really have any predispositions to higher or lower levels of empathy. For diabetes, let's see. Remember, she was scoring really high for type 1 diabetes, so she's got the genotype for increased odds of type 1 diabetes. She's got the genotype for decrease in the risk of type 1 diabetes. She's got the genotype for decrease in the risk of type 1 diabetes. She's got the genotype for decrease. That's interesting. So she's scoring lower for risk of type 1 diabetes, but somehow she's actually got all these genotypes for decrease the risk of type 1 diabetes. So I'm thinking that there's something else that's contributing to the score that's not showing up on the screen. For Alzheimer's, no risk variance in APOE. Okay. For multiple sclerosis, no risk variance in HLA. Well, we remember that. Of course, she does not have any risk variance in HLA because her risk score for MS is like 0.6, so that makes sense. For cardiovascular disease panel, it looks like she's got predisposition to lower odds of cardiovascular issues, which is really good to see. For epilepsy, well, let's not talk about that. For vitiligo panel, she's got 2 risk variants for vitiligo in this HLA variation. Definitely very interesting. So she's actually got some risk variants in HLA. But I feel like her HLA gene panel is not going to look very bad because she's got so many good genotypes in HLA that these 2 risk variants in HLA are not going to spoil the picture too much. Okay, when it comes to facial morphology panel, she's got European genotype here, European genotype here in EDAR, and heterozygous genotype in this variation of EDAR. So 1 European allele, 1 East Asian allele. So pretty much heterozygous genotype in this variation of EDAR, but European genotype in this variation and European genotype in this variation. 3 variations of EDAR, and European genotype in 2 variations, and partially European genotype in 1 variation. Genotype for short-term midface length, a genotype for intermediate odds of protruding nasal bridge, genotype for intermediate nose size, nose pointing up, and genotype for slightly thinner eyebrows. Definitely very interesting. Okay, it doesn't have micropenis. Got a mix of muscle types, likely more sprinter than an endurance athlete. Likely has photic sneeze reflex, and not an Asian flusher. Definitely very interesting. Okay. Let's see what else. For MTHFR panel, she's got 1 genotype that's really good for normal homocysteine levels and lower than average odds for a variety of illnesses from autism to coronary heart disease. So 1 genotype is good, but another genotype leads to possibly impaired folate metabolism. So I feel like when we look at the homocysteine levels, we're gonna see some. Because these genotypes, one of them, for example, this genotype increases the homocysteine levels for the homocysteine level panel. This genotype decreases them. So I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly the contribution that each of these genotypes play, but I feel like we're gonna see something interesting with the panel for sure. It might end up evening out and being average, because there's other genotypes that play a role as well besides the MTHFR panel. Leukemia panel, she's got 2 risk alleles in this variation of NQ01. Definitely very interesting. What was she scoring for leukemia, actually? Let's see. What was she scoring for leukemia? Yes, she was scoring a little bit above average for leukemia. Okay. For rare disease and traits panel, we see strong predisposition to hemoglobin E disease. We already went over that. Spina bifida, we went over that, but pretty much nothing else. Celiac disease, no risk variance for celiac disease in HLA gene, really good to see. For androgen receptor gene panel, she's got this gene type, which leads to higher odds of baldness. All right. Canavan syndrome, no risk variance for Canavan syndrome. HIV in AIDS panel, she's got 2 protective variants from HIV, which is really good, which leads to 90% reduction in HIV viral load. Really good to see. And for HLA gene panel, looks like she's got lower odds of autoimmune disease. Really good to see. So she's actually got quite a good genotype in HLA gene, quite protected from various disorders of autoimmune disorders. Pretty good to see. MTRR gene panel, looks like she's got 2 risk variants for disorders of autoimmune intracellular globin metabolism. But for these variations, no risk variance for that. Quite good. And for CBS panel, she's got predisposition to intermediate homocysteine levels. All right. Okay, that's pretty good. Typical. For muscular dystrophy myopathies, looks like she's got no risk variance for these myopathies, and no risk variance for ADL. For the color blindness panel, she's got no risk variance for color blindness. For FTO gene panel, she's got predisposition to lower odds of obesity, lower or intermediate odds of obesity. So she definitely is not predisposed to higher odds of obesity, which is really good to see. For syncope panel, based on 3 SNPs, she's got slightly higher than average also syncope. For biotraits panel, looks like she's got, let's see, what can we talk about here? Lower risk of hypertension and obesity, lower response to Viagra, and less weight gain when treated with clozapine. Clozapine is an antipsychotic medicine, in case you don't know. Decreased risk of bone mineral density disorders. Okay. Okay. Let's see. What else? Okay, for blood group panel, I'm just going to skip over all of this and move on to blood group panel. For blood group panel, it looks like her blood type is most likely type B. It's a very precise prediction here. Definitely not any other blood type. Definitely she has blood type B blood group. And that's a very precise prediction right here. So most common blood type is type O. Second most is probably type A, but in her case, she has blood type B. Very cool. Unusual. Unlikely. Well, thanks for watching my video until the very end. Make sure you check out all the other 11 videos that I'm going to be making. Make sure you stay updated. Make sure you go and check out my tool that is on itch. The link to that will be in the description of the video. If you don't want to check out my tool, make sure you go and check out the reports, individual reports for $4. The link to buy those will be in the description as well. You know. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. Leave a like. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.